Chapter 25. The Service of King Louis. Meanwhile, some 3 months before Colonel Bishop set out to reduce Tortuga, Captain Blood, bearing hell in his soul, had blown into its rock-bound harbor ahead of the winter gales, and 2 days ahead of the frigate in which Wolverstone had sailed from Port Royal a day before him. In that snug anchorage he found his fleet awaiting him. The 4 ships which had been separated in that gale off the Lesser Antilles, and some 700 men composing their crews. Because they had been beginning to grow anxious on his behalf, they gave him the greater welcome. Guns were fired in his honor, and the ships made themselves gay with bunting. The town, aroused by all this noise in the harbor, emptied itself upon the jetty, and a vast crowd of men and women of all creeds and nationalities collected there to be present at the coming ashore of the great buccaneer. Ashore he went, probably for no other reason than to obey the general expectation. His mood was taciturn, his face grim and sneering. Let Wolverstone arrive, as presently he would, and all this hero worship would turn to execration. His captains, Hagthorpe, Christian, and Iberville, were on the jetty to receive him, and with them were some hundreds of his buccaneers. He cut short their greetings, and when they plagued him with questions of where he had tarried, he bade them await the coming of Wolverstone, who would satisfy their curiosity to a surfeit. On that he shook them off, and shouldered his way through that heterogeneous throng that was composed of bustling traders of several nations, English, French, and Dutch, of planters and of seamen of various degrees, of buccaneers who were fruit-selling half-castes, Negro slaves, some doll tear-sheets and dunghill queens from the Old World, and all the other types of the human family that converted the quays of Kiona into a disreputable image of Babel. Winning clear at last, and after difficulties, Captain Blood took his way alone to the fine house of M. d'Ogeron, there to pay his respects to his friends, the governor and the governor's family. At first, the buccaneers jumped to the conclusion that Wolverstone was following with some rare prize of war, but gradually from the reduced crew of the Arabella, a very different tale leaked out to stem their satisfaction and convert it into perplexity. Partly out of loyalty to their captain, partly because they perceived that if he was guilty of defection, they were guilty with him, and partly because being simple, sturdy men of their hands, they were themselves, in the main, a little confused as to what really had happened. The crew of the Arabella practiced reticence with their brethren in Tortuga during those 2 days before Wolverstone's arrival. But they were not reticent enough to prevent the circulation of certain uneasy rumors and extravagant stories of discreditable adventures, discreditable, that is, from the buccaneering point of view, of which Captain Blood had been guilty. But that Wolverstone came when he did, it is possible that there would have been an explosion. When, however, the old wolf cast anchor in the bay 2 days later, it was to him all turned for the explanation they were about to demand of Blood. Now, Wolverstone had only one eye, but he saw a deal more with that one eye than do most men with 2, and despite his grizzled head, so picturesquely swathed in a green and scarlet turban, he had the sound heart of a boy, and in that heart much love for Peter Blood. The sight of the Arabella at anchor in the bay had at first amazed him as he sailed round the rocky headland that bore the fort. He rubbed his single eye clear of any deceiving film and looked again. Still he could not believe what it saw. And then a voice at his elbow, the voice of Dyke, who had elected to sail with him, assured him that he was not singular in his bewilderment. In the name of heaven, is that the Arabella, or is it the ghost of her? The old wolf rolled his single eye over Dyke and opened his mouth to speak. Then he closed it again without having spoken, closed it tightly. He had a great gift of caution, especially in matters that he did not understand. That this was the Arabella he could no longer doubt. That, being so, he must think before he spoke. What the devil should the Arabella be doing here when he had left her in Jamaica? And was Captain Blood aboard and in command? or had the remainder of her hands made off with her, leaving the captain in Port Royal? Dyke repeated his question. This time Wolverstone answered him. You've 2 eyes to see with, and ye ask me, who's only got one, what it is, ye see. But I see the Arabella. Of course, since there she rides, what else was you expecting? Expecting? Dyke stared at him, open-mouthed. Was you expecting to find the Arabella here? Wolverstone looked him over in contempt, then laughed and spoke loud enough to be heard by all around him. Of course, what else? And he laughed again, a laugh that seemed to Dyke to be calling him a fool. On that, Wolverstone turned to give his attention to the operation of anchoring. Anon, when ashore, he was beset by questioning buccaneers. It was from their very questions that he gathered exactly how matters stood, and perceived that either from lack of courage or other motive, Blood, himself, had refused to render any account of his doings since the Arabella had separated from her sister ships. Wolverstone congratulated himself upon the discretion he had used with Dyke. The captain was ever a modest man, he explained to Hagthorpe and those others who came crowding round him. It's not his way to be sounding his own praises. Why, it was like this. We fell in with old Don Miguel, and when we'd scuttled him, we took aboard a London pimp sent out by the Secretary of State to offer the captain the king's commission, if so be him'd quit piracy and be a good behavior. The captain damned his soul to hell for answer. And then we fell in with the Jamaica fleet and that gray old devil Bishop in command, and there was a sure end to Captain Blood and to every mother's son of us all. So I goes to him, and accept this poxy commission, says I. Turn king's man, and save your neck and ours. He took me at my word, and the London pimp gave him the king's commission on the spot, and Bishop all but choked hisself with rage when he was told of it. But happened it had, and he was forced to swallow it. We were king's men all, and so into Port Royal we sailed along a Bishop. But Bishop didn't trust us, he knew too much, but for his lordship, the fellow from London, he'd ha hanged the captain, king's commission and all. Blood would ha slipped out of Port Royal again that same night, but that hound Bishop had passed the word, and the fort kept a sharp lookout. In the end, though it took a fortnight, Blood bubbled him. He sent me and most of the men off in a frigate that I bought for the voyage. His game, as he'd secretly told me, was to follow and give chase. Whether that's the game he played or not, I can't tell ye. But here he is afore me as I'd expected he would be. There was a great historian lost in Wolverstone. He had the right imagination that knows just how far it is safe to stray from the truth and just how far to color it so as to change its shape for his own purposes. Having delivered himself of his decoction of fact and falsehood, and thereby added one more to the exploits of Peter Blood, he inquired where the captain might be found. Being informed that he kept his ship, Wolverstone stepped into a boat and went aboard to report himself, as he put it. In the great cabin of the Arabella he found Peter Blood alone and very far gone in drink, a condition in which no man ever before remembered to have seen him. As Wolverstone came in, the captain raised bloodshot eyes to consider him. A moment they sharpened in their gaze as he brought his visitor into focus. Then he laughed, a loose, idiot laugh that yet somehow was half a sneer. "Ah, the old wolf," said he. "Got here at last, eh? And what you're gunner do wi' me, eh?" He hiccoughed resoundingly and sagged back loosely in his chair. Old Wolverstone stared at him in somber silence. He had looked with untroubled eye upon many a hell of devilment in his time, but the sight of Captain Blood in this condition filled him with sudden grief. To express it, he loosed an oath. It was his only expression for emotion of all kinds. Then he rolled forward and dropped into a chair at the table, facing the captain. "My God, Peter, what's this?" "Rum," said Peter. "Rum from Jamaica." He pushed bottle and glass towards Wolverstone. Wolverstone disregarded them. "I'm asking you what ails you?" he bawled. "Rum," said Captain Blood again, and smiled. "Juice's rum. I answer all your questions. Why don't yer answer mine? What your gonardo was me? I've done it, said Wolverstone. Thank God ye had the sense to hold your tongue till I came. Are ye sober enough to understand me? Drunk or sober, Alice durstand you. Then listen. And out came the tale that Wolverstone had told. The captain steadied himself to grasp it. It'll do as well as her truth, said he when Wolverstone had finished, and oh no marer, much obliged to ye, old wolf, faithful old wolf. But was it worth her trouble? I'm nor a pirate now, never a pirate again. Finished. He banged the table, his eyes suddenly fierce. I'll come and talk to you again when there's less rum in your wits, said Wolverstone, rising. Meanwhile, you'll please to remember the tale I've told and say nothing that'll make me out a liar. They all believes me, even the men as sailed wiz me from Port Royal. I've made 'em. If they thought as how you'd taken the king's commission in earnest and for the purpose o' doing as Morgan did, ye guess what would follow. Hell would follow, said the captain, and tha's all I'm fit for. You're maudlin, Wolverstone growled. We'll talk again tomorrow. They did, but to little purpose, either that day or on any day thereafter while the rains, which said in that night, endured. Soon the shrewd Wolverstone discovered that rum was not what ailed blood. Rum was in itself an effect, and not by any means the cause of the captain's listless apathy. There was a canker eating at his heart, and the old wolf knew enough to make a shrewd guess of its nature. He cursed all things that daggled petticoats, and, knowing his world, waited for the sickness to pass. But it did not pass. When Blood was not dicing or drinking in the taverns of Tortuga, keeping company that in his saner days he had loathed, he was shut up in his cabin aboard the Arabella, alone and uncommunicative. His friends at Government House, bewildered at this change in him, sought to reclaim him. Mademoiselle d'Ogeron, particularly distressed, sent him almost daily invitations, to few of which he responded. Later, as the rainy season approached its end, he was sought by his captains with proposals of remunerative raids on Spanish settlements. But to all he manifested an indifference which, as the weeks passed and the weather became settled, begot first impatience and then exasperation. Christian, who commanded the Clotho, came storming to him one day, upbraiding him for his inaction and demanding that he should take order about what was to do. Go to the devil, Blood said when he had heard him out. Christian departed fuming, and on the morrow the Clotho weighed anchor and sailed away, setting an example of desertion from which the loyalty of Blood's other captains would soon be unable to restrain their men. Sometimes Blood asked himself, why had he come back to Tortuga at all? Held fast in bondage by the thought of Arabella and her scorn of him for a thief and a pirate, he had sworn that he had done with buccaneering. Why, then, was he here? That question he would answer with another. Where else was he to go? Neither backward nor forward could he move, it seemed. He was degenerating visibly, under the eyes of all. He had entirely lost the almost foppish concern for his appearance and was grown careless and slovenly in his dress. He allowed a black beard to grow on cheeks that had ever been so carefully shaven, and the long, thick black hair, once so sedulously curled, hung now in a lank, untidy mane about a face that was changing from its vigorous swarthiness to an unhealthy sallow, whilst the blue eyes, that had been so vivid and compelling, were now dull and lackluster. Wolverstone, the only one who held the clue to this degeneration, ventured once and once only to beard him frankly about it. "Lord Peter, is there never to be no end to this?" the giant had growled. "Will you spend your days moping and swillin' 'cause a white-faced ninny in Port Royal'll have none o' ye? Splud and ounds. If ye wants the wench, why the plague doesn't ye go and fetch her?" The blue eyes glared at him from under the jet-black eyebrows, and something of their old fire began to kindle in them. But Wolverstone went on heedlessly. "I'll be nice wiz a wench as long as niceness be the key to her favor. But sink me now if I'd rot myself in rum on account of anything that wears a petticoat. That's not the old wolf's way. If there's no other expedition'll tempt you, why not Port Royal? What a plague do it matter if it is an English settlement? It's commanded by Colonel Bishop, and there's no lack of rascals in your company'd follow you to hell if it meant getting Colonel Bishop by the throat. It could be done, I tell you. We've but to spy the chance when the Jamaica fleet is away. There's enough plunder in the town to tempt the lads, and there's the wench for you. Shall I sound them on? Blood was on his feet, his eyes blazing, his livid face distorted. Ye'll leave my cabin this minute, so ye will, or, by heaven, it's your corpse'll be carried out of it. Ye mangy hound, d'ye dare come to me with such proposals? He fell to cursing his faithful officer with a virulence, the like of which he had never yet been known to use, and Wolverstone, in terror before that fury, went out without another word. The subject was not raised again, and Captain Blood was left to his idle abstraction. But at last, as his buccaneers were growing desperate, something happened, brought about by the captain's friend, M. d'Ogeron. One sunny morning, the governor of Tortuga came aboard the Arabella, accompanied by a chubby little gentleman, amiable of countenance, amiable and self-sufficient of manner. "My captain," M. d'Ogeron delivered himself, "I bring you M. de Cussy, the governor of French Hispaniola, who desires a word with you." Out of consideration for his friend, Captain Blood pulled the pipe from his mouth, shook some of the rum out of his wits, and rose and made a leg to M. de Cussy. "Serviteur," said he. M. de Cussy returned the bow and accepted a seat on the locker under the stem windows. "You have a good force here under your command, my captain," said he. "Some 800 men, and I understand they grow restive in idleness. They may go to the devil when they please." M. de Cussy took snuff delicately. "I have something better than that to propose," said he. "Propose it, then," said Blood, without interest. M. de Cussy looked at M. d'Ogeron and raised his eyebrows a little. He did not find Captain Blood encouraging, but M. d'Ogeron nodded vigorously with pursed lips, and the governor of Hispaniola propounded his business. "News has reached us from France that there is war with Spain." "That is news, is it?" growled Blood. "I am speaking officially, my captain. I am not alluding to unofficial skirmishes and unofficial predatory measures which we have condoned out here. There is war, formally war, between France and Spain in Europe. It is the intention of France that this war shall be carried into the New World. A fleet is coming out from Brest under the command of M. le Baron de Rivarol for that purpose. I have letters from him desiring me to equip a supplementary squadron and raise a body of not less than 1,000 men to reinforce him on his arrival. What I have come to propose to you, my captain, at the suggestion of our good friend M. d'Ogeron is, in brief, that you enroll your ships and your force under M. de Rivarol's flag." Blood looked at him with a faint kindling of interest. "You are offering to take us into the French service?" he asked. "On what terms, monsieur?" "With the rank of Capitaine de Vaisseau for yourself, and suitable ranks for the officers serving under you. You will enjoy the pay of that rank, and you will be entitled, together with your men, to 1/10 share in all prizes taken. My men will hardly account it generous. They will tell you that they can sail out of here tomorrow, disembowel a Spanish settlement, and keep the whole of the plunder." "Ah, yes, but with the risks attaching to acts of piracy. With us, your position will be regular and official, and considering the powerful fleet by which M. de Rivarol is backed, the enterprises to be undertaken will be on a much vaster scale than anything you could attempt on your own account, so that the 1/10 in this case may be equal to more than the whole in the other." Captain Blood considered. This, after all, was not piracy that was being proposed. It was honorable employment in the service of the King of France. "I will consult my officers," he said, and he sent for them. They came, and the matter was laid before them by M. de Cussy himself. Hagthorpe announced at once that the proposal was opportune. The men were grumbling at their protracted inaction and would no doubt be ready to accept the service which M. de Coucy offered on behalf of France. Hagthorpe looked at Blood as he spoke. Blood nodded gloomy agreement. Emboldened by this, they went on to discuss the terms. Iberville, the young French filibuster, had the honor to point out to M. de Coucy that the share offered was too small. For 1/5 of the prizes, the officers would answer for their men, not for less. M. de Coucy was distressed. He had his instructions. It was taking a deal upon himself to exceed them. The buccaneers were firm. Unless M. de Coucy could make it 1/5, there was no more to be said. M. de Coucy finally consenting to exceed his instructions, the articles were drawn up and signed that very day. The buccaneers were to be at Petit Goave by the end of January, when M. de Rivarol had announced that he might be expected. After that followed days of activity in Tortuga, refitting the ships, boucanning meat, laying in stores. In these matters, which once would have engaged all Captain Blood's attention, he now took no part. He continued listless and aloof. If he had given his consent to the undertaking, or rather allowed himself to be swept into it by the wishes of his officers, it was only because the service offered was of a regular and honorable kind, nowise connected with piracy, with which he swore in his heart that he had done forever. But his consent remained passive. The service entered awoke no zeal in him. He was perfectly indifferent, as he told Hagthorpe, who ventured once to offer a remonstrance, whether they went to Petit Goave or to Hades, and whether they entered the service of Louis XIV or of Satan. Chapter 26. M. de Rivarol. Captain Blood was still in that disgruntled mood when he sailed from Tortuga, and still in that mood when he came to his moorings in the bay of Petit Goave. In that same mood, he greeted M. le Baron de Rivarol. When this nobleman with his fleet of 5 men of war at last dropped anchor alongside the buccaneer ships in the middle of February, the Frenchman had been 6 weeks on the voyage, he announced, delayed by unfavorable weather. Summoned to wait on him, Captain Blood repaired to the castle of Petit Goave, where the interview was to take place. The Baron, a tall, hawk-faced man of 40, very cold and distant of manner, measured Captain Blood with an eye of obvious disapproval. Of Hagthorpe, Iberville, and Wolverstone, who stood ranged behind their captain, he took no heed whatever. M. de Coucy offered Captain Blood a chair. A moment, M. de Coucy. I do not think M. le Baron has observed that I am not alone. Let me present to you, sir, my companions, Captain Hagthorpe of the Elizabeth, Captain Wolverstone of the Atropos, and Captain Iberville of the Lachesis. The Baron stared hard and haughtily at Captain Blood, then very distantly and barely perceptibly inclined his head to each of the other 3. His manner implied plainly that he despised them and that he desired them at once to understand it. It had a curious effect upon Captain Blood. It awoke the devil in him, and it awoke at the same time his self-respect, which of late had been slumbering. A sudden shame of his disordered, ill-kempt appearance made him perhaps the more defiant. There was almost a significance in the way he hitched his sword-belt round so that the wrought hilt of his very serviceable rapier was brought into fuller view. He waved his captains to the chairs that stood about. "Draw up to the table, lads. We are keeping the Baron waiting." They obeyed him, Wolverstone with a grin that was full of understanding. Haughtier grew the stare of M. de Rivarol. To sit at table with these bandits placed him upon what he accounted a dishonoring equality. It had been his notion that, with the possible exception of Captain Blood, they should take his instructions standing, as became men of their quality in the presence of a man of his. He did the only thing remaining to mark a distinction between himself and them. He put on his hat. "You're very wise now," said Blood amiably. "I feel the draught myself." And he covered himself with his plumed castor. M. de Rivarol changed color. He quivered visibly with anger and was a moment controlling himself before venturing to speak. M. de Coucy was obviously very ill at ease. "Sir," said the Baron frostily, "you compel me to remind you that the rank you hold is that of Capitaine de Vasseur, and that you are in the presence of the General of the armies of France by sea and land in America. You compel me to remind you further that there is a deference due from your rank to mine. I am happy to assure you," said Captain Blood, "that the reminder is unnecessary. I am by way of accounting myself a gentleman, little though I may look like one at present, and I should not account myself that were I capable of anything but deference to those whom nature or fortune may have placed above me, or to those who, being placed beneath me in rank, may labor under a disability to resent my lack of it." It was a neatly intangible rebuke. M. de Rivarol bit his lip. Captain Blood swept on without giving him time to reply. Thus much being clear, shall we come to business? M. de Rivarol's hard eyes considered him a moment. "Perhaps it will be best," said he. He took up a paper. "I have here a copy of the articles into which you entered with M. de Coucy. Before going further, I have to observe that M. de Coucy has exceeded his instructions in admitting you to 1/5 of the prizes taken. His authority did not warrant his going beyond 1/10. That is a matter between yourself and M. de Coucy, my general. Oh, no, it is a matter between myself and you. Your pardon, my general, the articles are signed. So far as we are concerned, the matter is closed. Also, out of regard for M. de Coucy, we should not desire to be witnesses of the rebukes you may consider that he deserves. What I may have to say to M. de Coucy is no concern of yours. That is what I am telling you, my general. But, nom de Dieu, it is your concern, I suppose, that we cannot award you more than 1/10 share." M. de Rivarol smote the table in exasperation. This pirate was too infernally skillful a fencer. "You are quite certain of that, M. le Baron, that you cannot?" "I am quite certain that I will not." Captain Blood shrugged and looked down his nose. "In that case," said he, "it but remains for me to present my little account for our disbursement and to fix the sum at which we should be compensated for our loss of time and derangement in coming hither. That settled, we can part friends, M. le Baron. No harm has been done." "What the devil do you mean?" The Baron was on his feet, leaning forward across the table. "Is it possible that I am obscure? My French, perhaps, is not of the purest, but—" "Oh, your French is fluent enough, too fluent at moments, if I may permit myself the observation. Now, look you here, M. le Filibustier, I am not a man with whom it is safe to play the fool, as you may very soon discover. You have accepted service of the King of France, you and your men. You hold the rank and draw the pay of a capitaine de vaisseau, and these, your officers, hold the rank of lieutenants. These ranks carry obligations which you would do well to study, and penalties for failing to discharge them which you might study at the same time. They are something severe. The first obligation of an officer is obedience. I commend it to your attention. You are not to conceive yourselves, as you appear to be doing, my allies in the enterprises I have in view, but my subordinates. In me you behold a commander to lead you, not a companion or an equal. You understand me, I hope." "Oh, be sure that I understand." Captain Blood laughed. He was recovering his normal self amazingly under the inspiring stimulus of conflict. The only thing that marred his enjoyment was the reflection that he had not shaved. "I forget nothing, I assure you, my general. I do not forget, for instance, as you appear to be doing, that the articles we signed are the condition of our service, and the articles provide that we receive 1/5 share. Refuse us that, and you cancel the articles, and you cancel our services with them. From that moment, we cease to have the honor to hold rank in the navies of the King of France. There was more than a murmur of approval from his 3 captains. Rivarol glared at them, checkmated. In effect, M. de Coucy was beginning timidly. In effect, monsieur, this is your doing. The Baron flashed on him, glad to have someone upon whom he could fasten the sharp fangs of his irritation. You should be broke for it. You bring the King's service into disrepute. You force me, His Majesty's representative, into an impossible position. Is it impossible to award us the 1/5 share? Quoth Captain Blood sulkily. In that case, there is no need for beat or for injuries to M. de Coucy. M. de Coucy knows that we would not have come for less. We depart again upon your assurance that you cannot award us more, and things are as they would have been if M. de Coucy had adhered rigidly to his instructions. I have proved, I hope, to your satisfaction, M. Le Baron, that if you repudiate the articles, you can neither claim our services nor hinder our departure, not in honor. Not in honor, sir. To the devil with your insolence. Do you imply that any course that were not in honor would be possible to me? I do not imply it, because it would not be possible, said Captain Blood. We should see to that. It is, my general, for you to say whether the articles are repudiated. The Baron sat down. I will consider the matter, he said sullenly. You shall be advised of my resolve. Captain Blood rose. His officers rose with him. Captain Blood bowed. M. le Baron, said he. Then he and his buccaneers removed themselves from the august and irate presence of the general of the King's armies by land and sea in America. You conceive that there followed for M. de Coucy an extremely bad quarter of an hour. M. de Coucy, in fact, deserves your sympathy. His self-sufficiency was blown from him by the haughty M. de Rivarol as down from a thistle by the winds of autumn. The general of the King's armies abused him, this man who was governor of Hispaniola, as if he were a lackey. M. De Coucy defended himself by urging the thing that Captain Blood had so admirably urged already on his behalf, that if the terms he had made with the buccaneers were not confirmed, there was no harm done. M. de Rivarol bullied and browbeat him into silence. Having exhausted abuse, the Baron proceeded to indignities. Since he accounted that M. de Coucy had proved himself unworthy of the post he held, M. de Rivarol took over the responsibilities of that post for as long as he might remain in Hispaniola, and to give effect to this, he began by bringing soldiers from his ships and setting his own guard in M. de Coucy's castle. Out of this, trouble followed quickly. Wolverstone coming ashore next morning in the picturesque garb that he affected, his head swathed in a colored handkerchief, was jeered at by an officer of the newly landed French troops. Not accustomed to derision, Wolverstone replied in kind and with interest. The officer passed to insult, and Wolverstone struck him a blow that felled him and left him only the half of his poor senses. Within the hour, the matter was reported to M. de Rivarol, and before noon, by M. de Rivarol's orders, Wolverstone was under arrest in the castle. The Baron had just sat down to dinner with M. de Coucy when the Negro who waited on them announced Captain Blood. Peevishly, M. de Rivarol bade him be admitted, and there entered now into his presence a spruce and modish gentleman, dressed with care and sombre richness in black and silver, his swarthy, clear-cut face scrupulously shaven, his long black hair in ringlets that fell to a collar of fine point. In his right hand the gentleman carried a broad black hat with a scarlet ostrich plume, in his left hand an ebony cane. His stockings were of silk, a bunch of ribbons masked his garters, and the black rosettes on his shoes were finely edged with gold. For a moment M. de Rivarol did not recognize him, for Blood looked younger by 10 years than yesterday. But the vivid blue eyes under their level black brows were not to be forgotten, and they proclaimed him for the man announced even before he had spoken. His resurrected pride had demanded that he should put himself on an equality with the Baron and advertise that equality by his exterior. "I come inopportunely," he courteously excused himself. "My apologies. My business could not wait. It concerns M. de Cussy, Captain Wolverstone of the Lachesis, whom you have placed under arrest." "It was I who placed him under arrest," said M. de Rivarol. "Indeed, but I thought that M. de Cussy was governor of Hispaniola." "Whilst I am here, monsieur, I am the supreme authority. It is as well that you should understand it." "Perfectly, but it is not possible that you are aware of the mistake that has been made." "Mistake, do you say?" "I say mistake. On the whole, it is polite of me to use that word. Also, it is expedient. It will save discussions. Your people have arrested the wrong man, M. de Rivarol. Instead of the French officer who used the grossest provocation, they have arrested Captain Wolverstone. It is a matter which I beg you to reverse without delay." M. de Rivarol's hawk face flamed scarlet. His dark eyes bulged. "Sir, you are insolent, but of an insolence that is intolerable." Normally a man of the utmost self-possession, he was so rudely shaken now that he actually stammered. "M. le Baron, you waste words. This is the new world. It is not merely new, it is novel to one reared amid the superstitions of the old. That novelty you have not yet had time, perhaps, to realize. Therefore I overlook the offensive epithet you have used. But justice is justice in the new world as in the old, and injustice as intolerable here as there. Now justice demands the enlargement of my officer and the arrest and punishment of yours. That justice I invite you, with submission, to administer." "With submission?" snorted the Baron in furious scorn. "With the utmost submission, monsieur, but at the same time I will remind M. le Baron that my buccaneers number 800, your troops 500, and M. de Cussy will inform you of the interesting fact that any one buccaneer is equal in action to at least 3 soldiers of the line. I am perfectly frank with you, monsieur, to save time and hard words. Either Captain Wolverstone is instantly set at liberty, or we must take measures to set him at liberty ourselves. The consequences may be appalling, but it is as you please, M. le Baron. You are the supreme authority. It is for you to say." M. de Rivarol was white to the lips. In all his life he had never been so bearded and defied, but he controlled himself. "You will do me the favor to wait in the ante-room, M. le Capitaine. I desire a word with M. de Cussy. You shall presently be informed of my decision." When the door had closed, the Baron loosed his fury upon the head of M. de Cussy. "So, these are the men you have enlisted in the king's service, the men who are to serve under me, men who do not serve, but dictate, and this before the enterprise that has brought me from France is even under way. What explanations do you offer me, M. de Cussy? I warn you that I am not pleased with you. I am, in fact, as you may perceive, exceedingly angry." The governor seemed to shed his chubbiness. He drew himself stiffly erect. "Your rank, monsieur, does not give you the right to rebuke me, nor do the facts. I have enlisted for you the men that you desired me to enlist. It is not my fault if you do not know how to handle them better. As Captain Blood has told you, this is the new world." So, M. de Rivarol smiled malignantly. "Not only do you offer no explanation, but you venture to put me in the wrong. Almost I admire your temerity. But there," he waved the matter aside. He was supremely sardonic. "It is, you tell me, the new world and new worlds, new manners, I suppose. In time I may conform my ideas to this new world, or I may conform this new world to my ideas." He was menacing on that. "For the moment I must accept what I find." It remains for you, monsieur, who have experience of these savage byways, to advise me out of that experience how to act. Le Baron, it was a folly to have arrested the buccaneer captain. It would be madness to persist. We have not the forces to meet force. In that case, monsieur, perhaps you will tell me what we are to do with regard to the future. Am I to submit at every turn to the dictates of this man, Blood? Is the enterprise upon which we are embarked to be conducted as he decrees? Am I, in short, the king's representative in America, to be at the mercy of these rascals? Oh, by no means. I am enrolling volunteers here in Hispaniola, and I am raising a corps of Negroes. I compute that, when this is done, we shall have a force of 1,000 men, the buccaneers apart. But in that case, why not dispense with them? Because they will always remain the sharp edge of any weapon that we forge. In the class of warfare that lies before us, they are so skilled that what Captain Blood has just said is not an overstatement. A buccaneer is equal to 3 soldiers of the line. At the same time, we shall have a sufficient force to keep them in control. For the rest, monsieur, they have certain notions of honor. They will stand by their articles, and so that we deal justly with them, they will deal justly with us, and give no trouble. I have experience of them, and I pledge you my word for that. De Rivarol condescended to be mollified. It was necessary that he should save his face, and in a degree the governor afforded him the means to do so, as well as a certain guarantee for the future in the further force he was raising. "Very well," he said, "be so good as to recall this Captain Blood." The captain came in, assured and very dignified. De Rivarol found him detestable, but dissembled it. Le Capitaine, I have taken counsel with le Gouverneur. From what he tells me, it is possible that a mistake has been committed. Justice, you may be sure, shall be done. To ensure it, I shall myself preside over a council to be composed of 2 of my senior officers, yourself and an officer of yours. This council shall hold at once an impartial investigation into the affair, and the offender, the man guilty of having given provocation, shall be punished. Captain Blood bowed. It was not his wish to be extreme. Perfectly, le Baron. And now, sir, you have had the night for reflection in this matter of the articles. Am I to understand that you confirm, or that you repudiate them? De Rivarol's eyes narrowed. His mind was full of what de Cussy had said, that these buccaneers must prove the sharp edge of any weapon he might forge. He could not dispense with them. He perceived that he had blundered tactically in attempting to reduce the agreed share. Withdrawal from a position of that kind is ever fraught with loss of dignity. But there were those volunteers that de Cussy was enrolling to strengthen the hand of the king's general. Their presence might admit anon of the reopening of this question. Meanwhile, he must retire in the best order possible. I have considered that too, he announced. And whilst my opinion remains unaltered, I must confess that since de Cussy has pledged us, it is for us to fulfill the pledges. The articles are confirmed, sir. Captain Blood bowed again. In vain de Rivarol looked searchingly for the least trace of a smile of triumph on those firm lips. The buccaneer's face remained of the utmost gravity. Wolverstone was set at liberty that afternoon, and his assailant sentenced to 2 months' detention. Thus, harmony was restored. But it had been an unpromising beginning, and there was more to follow shortly of a similar discordant kind. Blood and his officers were summoned a week later to a council which sat to determine their operations against Spain. De Rivarol laid before them a project for a raid upon the wealthy Spanish town of Cartagena. Captain Blood professed astonishment. Sourly invited by de Rivarol to state his grounds for it, he did so with the utmost frankness. "Were I general of the king's armies in America," said he, "I should have no doubt or hesitation as to the best way in which to serve my royal master and the French nation. That which I think will be obvious to De Cusi, as it is to me, is that we should at once invade Spanish Hispaniola and reduce the whole of this fruitful and splendid island into the possession of the King of France. That may follow, said M. de Rivarol. It is my wish that we begin with Cartagena. You mean, sir, that we are to sail across the Caribbean on an adventurous expedition, neglecting that which lies here at our very door. In our absence, a Spanish invasion of French Hispaniola is possible. If we begin by reducing the Spaniards here, that possibility will be removed. We shall have added to the crown of France the most coveted possession in the West Indies. The enterprise offers no particular difficulty. It may be speedily accomplished, and once accomplished, it would be time to look farther afield. That would seem the logical order in which this campaign should proceed. He ceased, and there was silence. M. de Rivarol sat back in his chair, the feathered end of a quill between his teeth. Presently, he cleared his throat and asked a question. Is there anybody else who shares Captain Blood's opinion? None answered him. His own officers were overawed by him. Blood's followers naturally preferred Cartagena because offering the greater chance of loot. Loyalty to their leader kept them silent. You seem to be alone in your opinion, said the Baron with his vinegary smile. Captain Blood laughed outright. He had suddenly read the Baron's mind. His airs and graces and haughtiness had so imposed upon Blood that it was only now that at last he saw through them into the fellow's peddling spirit. Therefore he laughed. There was really nothing else to do, but his laughter was charged with more anger even than contempt. He had been deluding himself that he had done with piracy. The conviction that this French service was free of any taint of that was the only consideration that had induced him to accept it. Yet here was this haughty, supercilious gentleman, who dubbed himself General of the Armies of France, proposing a plundering, thieving raid, which, when stripped of its mean, transparent mask of legitimate warfare, was revealed as piracy of the most flagrant. M. de Rivarol, intrigued by his mirth, scowled upon him disapprovingly. Why do you laugh, monsieur? Because I discover here an irony that is supremely droll. You, M. Le Baron, General of the King's armies by land and sea in America, propose an enterprise of a purely buccaneering character, whilst I, the buccaneer, am urging one that is more concerned with upholding the honor of France. You perceive how droll it is. M. de Rivarol perceived nothing of the kind. M. de Rivarol, in fact, was extremely angry. He bounded to his feet, and every man in the room rose with him, save only M. de Cussy, who sat on with a grim smile on his lips. He, too, now read the Baron like an open book, and reading him, despised him. M. le filibustier, cried Rivarol in a thick voice, it seems that I must again remind you that I am your superior officer. My superior officer, you, lord of the world, why, you are just a common pirate. But you shall hear the truth for once, and that before all these gentlemen who have the honor to serve the King of France. It is for me, a buccaneer, a sea-robber, to stand here and tell you what is in the interest of French honor and the French crown. Whilst you, the French King's appointed general, neglecting this, are for spending the King's resources against an outlying settlement of no account, shedding French blood in seizing a place that cannot be held, only because it has been reported to you that there is much gold in Cartagena and that the plunder of it will enrich you. It is worthy of the huckster who sought to haggle with us about our share and to beat us down after the articles pledging you were already signed. If I am wrong, let M. de Cussy say so. If I am wrong, let me be proven wrong, and I will beg your pardon. Meanwhile, monsieur, I withdraw from this council. I will have no further part in your deliberations. I accepted the service of the King of France with intent to honor that service. I cannot honor that service by lending countenance to a waste of life and resources in raids upon unimportant settlements with plunder for their only object. The responsibility for such decisions must rest with you and with you alone. I desire M. de Cussy to report me to the ministers of France. For the rest, monsieur, it merely remains for you to give me your orders. I await them aboard my ship, and anything else, of a personal nature, that you may feel I have provoked by the terms I have felt compelled to use in this council. M. le Baron, I have the honor to wish you good day." He stalked out, and his 3 captains, although they thought him mad, rolled after him in loyal silence. M. de Rivarol was gasping like a landed fish. The stark truth had robbed him of speech. When he recovered, it was to thank heaven vigorously that the council was relieved by Captain Blood's own act of that gentleman's further participation in its deliberations. Inwardly, M. de Rivarol burned with shame and rage. The mask had been plucked from him, and he had been held up to scorn. He, the general of the king's armies by sea and land in America. Nevertheless, it was to Cartagena that they sailed in the middle of March. Volunteers and Negroes had brought up the forces directly under M. de Rivarol to 1,200 men. With these, he thought he could keep the buccaneer contingent in order and submissive. They made up an imposing fleet, led by M. de Rivarol's flagship, the Victorieuse, a mighty vessel of 80 guns. Each of the 4 other French ships was at least as powerful as Blood's Arabella, which was of 40 guns. Followed the lesser buccaneer vessels, the Elizabeth, Lachesis, and Atropos, and a dozen frigates laden with stores, besides canoes and small craft in tow. Narrowly they missed the Jamaica fleet with Colonel Bishop, which sailed north for Tortuga 2 days after the Baron de Rivarol's southward passage.